Hi, everyone, and welcome to Talks at Google. My name is Ivana Tay, and I'm so excited to host Sarah LaFleur, the CEO and founder of LaFleur today. For those of you who don't know, LaFleur is a New York-based women's wear styling company and community founded on the mission of making it easier to get ready for work and taking the work out of it. My relationship, funny enough, with LaFleur starts back a couple years ago when I actually saw a fellow Googler come out of the women's restroom wearing one of the trench coats. Of course, this prompted a search online where I learned about the brand and Sarah's journey as a founder. So I'm so elated to welcome Sarah LaFleur today.
Hey,
hey Sarah.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Good.
Where are you dialing in from?
We are in Connecticut, actually. We live in New York, but my husband and I were expecting a baby in the next month, and
yes.
We had a baby moon plan, which obviously, among the circumstances, canceled, and so we rented an Airbnb for a week, and decided to just escape the city for a little bit. And it's first time out of the city since everything's down, and it's I see trees.
Yes.
There's a farm next door, so I'm enjoying this brief moment outside of New York before I become a mom for the first time.
Yay, that's so exciting. Well, I'm very envious, and I'm glad you're getting some fresh air out of the city, and super stoked to have you here today. So I think we've got a lot of really cool, exciting things to cover. And just for the viewers to know, I think there's a lot we can discuss about, obviously, your journey as a founder, what it's been like for you to raise capital as you were building the business. Would love to get your perspective on fashion and e-com, especially in the age of COVID. And then lastly, we'll touch on your leadership philosophy, which I think has always been quite interesting. So we'll start from the very beginning. In your mid to late 20s, by your mid to late 20s, you'd worked in consulting at Bain, then you spent some time in TechnoServe in South Africa, and then you also worked in private equity. So you've quite a spectrum of work experiences. What was the impetus for you to then quit your job and start your company?
Yeah, my mom always makes fun of me, and she says that I have career bipolarism, where I one end to the other. So yes, it's true. I kind of, I was kind of in this very corporate sector, being at Bain, and swung to the other side, working for a nonprofit down in South Africa, which also loved, and then came back and tried my hand at private equity, and then now and launching So yeah, it's I think I'm 36 now, but I think if I could just reflect on my 20s for a second, for me, it was marked with a lot of, I think, just existential angst about what I wanted to do with my life. And I think very specifically my career. I think I've since learned that there's more to life than your job, but I'm sure many of you can relate. In my 20s, I mean, my job was everything, my career was everything, and I think through my career, I thought that's where I would make my mark. And so I was in constant search for this dream job, and so I think the result is I ended up trying a lot of different things that I thought maybe I would be good at. And most importantly, actually, no, it was less so what I was good at and more so what I thought would allow me to have an impact. And I think ultimately, I never planned to be an entrepreneur. Maybe I should start there. My mom is and was an entrepreneur, and so it's not as though the concept was foreign to me. But I think through her, I just saw how difficult it was, and so I never in my career plan thought an entrepreneur, that's what I want to be. That was never in the plan, and it really, I think what happened ultimately was that I left my last job, which was in private equity, really not being in such a good place. I think I moved back from South Africa thinking, okay, this is going to be the job that's for me, which ultimately turned out not to be. And I quit without a plan. Just kind of turned in my 2 weeks notice, went cold turkey, and then, was trying to figure out what to do with my life next. And that's where entrepreneurship came up. But I wouldn't even say it was entrepreneurship. I had an idea for a business. I wasn't thinking of like, well, now I'm going to be an entrepreneur. Yeah.
Right. There was a problem that you wanted to solve, which I'm sure stemmed also from you dressing for work in private equity, or when it was back in consulting at Bain. So once you quit your job, which I'm sure takes a ton of guts to do, right? It's a very scary thing to pull the trigger. What followed next? So you were, free, so to speak, had probably more time and to think about these things.
Yeah, I mean, I think I quit, and I think I cried for a good month and a half. That's actually, I particularly remember doing that as I watched, reruns of Grey's Anatomy.
As one does.
Yeah, one does. Yeah, I was not in a good place. I think, having just spent this all this kind of mental energy psyching myself up, thinking that this was going to be the thing. I was really not mentally in a great place. The idea that I always had, as Ivana, you mentioned, was just an idea for better workwear. And so having been at Bain and then in private equity, and even during my time working in nonprofits, there were various occasions that called for dressing up and for showing up. And there were always these kind of contemporary run-of-the-mill brands that I would go to buy these pieces. And I really found myself spending a lot of money for clothes that I didn't particularly like or think were well made. Right. And I think my mother worked in high-end fashion. So through her, I got to see and touch a lot of beautiful pieces that she would bring back. Not because she bought them, but it was because it was part of her job. And so, she taught me a lot about good fit and tailoring and dressing. And I think that's when I thought to myself, like, where is this level of quality for your average working woman? That's the idea that I had been kind of nursing with me since I had my first job. And I thought, at some point, someone will do something about this, or, maybe I'll do it when I retire. But I think just at that point, not really knowing what was next for me, I thought maybe this is the right time to actually go and work on it. And so that was the origin of MM.
Nice. And if not you, then who, right?
Yeah, but to be honest, not at all, because I come at it from a customer perspective, but my education in fashion was, nil. Like I had never gone to design school. I had never gone to merchandising school. I mean, I don't think of myself as having, I don't think I have poor taste in fashion, but I'm definitely, not a fashion obsessive. And so I think if you would ask any of my close friends from college, would Sarah be running a fashion tech startup, 10 years from now? Most of them have been like, no way. Like she's never pressed an interest. So it's funny how life turns out sometimes.
I think, some people would say also what it takes to be a good founder or a good leader is to be able to recognize where your strengths may lie, and then finding other folks who can complement, other areas. So if designing wasn't necessarily your skill set, your wheelhouse, you went out and you sought a designer to come through. So what was that process like for you to recruit for the company?
Yeah, Yvonne, that's such a good point. Never try to do everything yourself. It's a lesson in life, but for sure, it's something that's, I think, true in entrepreneurship. So, my title is founder and CEO, but I have a co-founder and a chief creative officer. Her name is Miyako Nakamura. She was the former head designer at Zac Posen, just an incredible design talent. the connection that we oddly have is well, I'm half Japanese and she's Japanese, so we both grew up in Japan, and people think that we actually met through somehow, the Japan connection, but actually we met through a headhunter in New York, a fashion headhunter in New York, because, as I was referencing before, I didn't know anybody in fashion. I didn't work in fashion. So
Right.
She was someone who I met through this, interview process. After interviewing dozens of candidates, my headhunter actually said, I was actually already set on someone else, and he said, I think there's one more woman you should meet. I think you guys would really hit it off. And I was like, I'm already quite happy with this other person that I found. And he was like, no, just trust me, meet with her. As they say, the rest is history. But I think there was some sort of kind of instinctive connection that we had. I think she was mostly just amused. As she would say, she thought like every single piece of clothing that needed to be designed in the world had already been designed. And here I was coming to her saying, hey, here's this whole market of working women who want beautiful, tailored clothes, but they care a lot about practicality and wrinkle resistance and ease of care, and washability, and
absolutely.
There really aren't clothes like that out there. Like,
right.
would you want to do this with me? And I think for someone like her who had been designing for the runway and for the Oscars and, just a variety of these couture gowns, this was a different challenge for her. And so, that's ultimately how we ended up coming together. But a lot of serendipity there.
Yep. Would you say, so since you both have this sort of shared Japanese descent, did that play any role in influencing the styles of the clothing you were producing, or perhaps the nature of the brand?
Yeah, I think when I specifically called about the need for more of this kind of clothing, she understood, because in Japan there is a market for this kind of, I shouldn't say there's a market. There are fashion brands who really do cater for this women and think a lot about practicality. Like Uniqlo, is a brand that I respect a lot. Also a Japanese brand. And if you think about a lot of the innovation that they've had in their clothing, whether it's heat tech or airism, I think there's something that's pretty innate in Japanese culture, is this desire to innovate. And I think that really extends into clothing as well. So when I talked to her about creating these pieces for working women, that wasn't just about looking good and being tailored and being well made. It was also about all these other practical elements. I think she kind of instinctively understood what it is that I was trying to get at. So I think that's one connection that or I should say one kind of context that she grasped immediately. I think the other thing is, she is full Japanese and I'm half Japanese, and I grew up, actually I spent most of my childhood in Japan. And so I think what was really special about us connecting, and being in New York, right? We're immigrants in New York. Of course. And suddenly we find ourselves talking to each other in Japanese. And I think, and she's also fluent in English as well. And I think somehow both of us feel that we're are 100% self when we're able to kind of just go back and forth in these two languages. And so that was quite special and unique, because I think most people that we interact with really only see one side of us, the Japanese side or the American side.
Yes. Oh, I love that. I love that you can bring this authentic version of yourself to work, and how it's so deeply embedded into the brand that you've built. I recall, I think one aspect of LaFleur is the bento box, right? Which is part of the styling service, which is definitely Japanese influenced. I remember reading that was sort of born out of a business decision to pivot from not just selling direct on your site, but you found an opportunity to open up the sort of subscription service. So was that born out of any particular obstacle that came about as you were, building the company, or how did you decide to kind of bake that into the company?
Yeah, so the company was founded in 2013, and so we've gone through various stages, and to use the tech term pivot, we've
of course
several times in business, but the bento was probably one of the biggest pivots that we've ever had as a company. I think when we first launched in 2013, really the heyday of a lot of these direct-to-consumer brands that were, or I shouldn't say heyday, first wave, no, or maybe second wave, whatever it was, really like Warby Parker and Everlane, those were arriving on the scene and gaining a lot of traction. And so, I mean, from the outside, it looked so easy. I was like, gosh, all you need to do is put a bunch of product on your e-com site, and next thing you know, you're like a million.
Branding, boom, yes.
Exactly. So, really, I think very naively, launched an e-commerce site, and long story short, it really wasn't working. I think part of the challenge was that our products weren't cheap. I think I think our clothes are phenomenal value. We're using best quality fabric and from Italy, Germany, Japan, making them in these top-notch factories and really putting an emphasis on quality. But it's very hard to tell that story online. And so, our dresses cost anywhere from $165 to $295, and to get a customer to pull the trigger on something like that, especially back in 2013, nowadays, people buy Pelotons on site.
True.
Right. So I think e-com has also evolved a lot, but back in 2013, it was a tall order to get, to convince women to buy a $250 dress without trying it on. And so really it was a moment of desperation that ultimately led us to this, to bento. And the bento was, it was very different from just shopping for yourself online. You would come to our site, fill out a survey, and based on that, our stylist would place in a box that looked like a bento box, which is why we called it the bento, pieces that we thought would work best for our customer. I think there are a lot of things that made that model work, but I think one of the most important things was customers weren't actually deciding whether to buy a $250 dress there on the spot. We were saying, we'll send it to you, you can try it on, and then only after you've tried it on, do you have to actually, decide whether to keep it or not. And so I think it just eliminated a lot of that friction that a lot of people feel when they're online shopping. I mean, I think this still happens today, right? How many browsers do you have open, and how many cards have you filled, and then ultimately not made it to checkout because of that hesitation. And I think the bento really, had a way of taking that element away. So when we launched the bento, so we launched our site 2013, we launched bento mid 2014. And I mean, to this day, it was really one of the most kind of shocking moments of running the company, because our revenue tripled overnight when we launched bento. And it was really, and it was such in some ways, such a simple change, right? Nothing about our products to change, nothing about our price or our branding or our value proposition didn't change at all. It was really just how we were selling the product to the customer that led to this explosion. So, it's, what very early on when we were first, fundraising, I remember Andrew Rosen, founder and former CEO of Theory. It's a long story, but we happened to just briefly kind of converse, and someone said, "Hey, Andrew, what do you think about the dresses? Our dresses?" And he said, "It doesn't matter what I think about the dress. It's all about how you sell it." And at the moment, I didn't quite understand what he meant, but that line always stuck with me. And I think it was only really after launching bento that I was like, that's what he meant,
So maybe it was actually quite serendipitous. You're meeting the customers where they are, and by doing that, you're elevating the shopping experience. So it was a smart move after all.
Yeah. It was a lot of learning about her and what we call her Samantha internally. That's
Sure.
the name we've given our customer. But she's not a fashion obsessive. She's not a fashion icon. She cares about looking great, but she wants it to be easy. She wants it to be practical. And I think that business model just kind of really fit right with what she was looking for at the time.
Yeah. You touched on something which I think is a great segue actually to talk about how you approached funding the company. I'm sure, we have a lot of viewers who may be aspiring entrepreneurs themselves, and funding is a big part of the process. So you had started the company with 35 grand of your own money and 35 grand from your parents.
Yeah.
Was that enough to get started?
It actually was. Yeah, it was. It's funny. You just reminded me of a story when I met with another woman who was also starting a company around the same time, and she was talking about using this very prestigious web development company. Kind of really one of the really trendy ones that you want to get in with if you have a DTC company. And she was like, yeah, just that'll cost you around $200,000. And I just remember hearing that, and I was like, oh my gosh, like what am I doing? Because I've got
that's a lot.
And I told my front end developer I think I could pay her 10 and our back end 20. And so I think at that point I was like, wow, my expectations and my budget are so wildly off. Like, how am I ever going to pull this off? And it turns out it was enough for the first prototype. Like even Miyako, I'm quite candid with the amount of money that I spent because I think there's just so much mystery surrounding it when they say, well, the so and so started this company from nothing, but you're like, but what's really nothing? And that 70K isn't nothing. It still is a lot of money. And back then, I literally took my entire savings and I just put it in.
Oh, gosh.
I had $0 left in my savings account. But I paid Miyako, I think $10,000. That was my initial offer. I said, will you design 7 dresses for me? It's a freelance project. It's $10K. And even the developers, who actually our backend developer ended up becoming our lead engineer and was with the company for, ultimately like 6 years. It was really a really magical relationship. And so I think the point is, like, you can get a lot done with very little money. And sometimes I think just even, we're a much bigger company now, but it's a good reminder. The budgets don't have to keep getting bigger, even if your company keeps getting bigger. I think there are always scrappy ways to get things done. And, not to start talking about COVID too much, but I think that's even COVID has been a reminder of things that can be really scrappily done.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And that's very reassuring also for anyone who wants to start something and is concerned that money might be a hindrance. I think on that note, in the past, you've expressed that entrepreneurship and venture capital is sort of a game for those who are well connected. Looking back last year, I think the female founded companies receive less than 3% of total VC funds. So, there's definitely a big gap to fill there. What advice do you have for female founders?
Yeah. This is such a tough one because it's the advice that needs to be given is really to the VCs and the environment that surrounds financing, and not to female founders. I think one thing that the personal pet peeve of mine, where they keep saying like, well, female founders need to like learn to act like the male founders. And I'm just like, but why? Like, why? Sometimes I listen to I'm overly generalizing here, but when they tell female founders to act more like the male founders, they'll say, just essentially the message is be overly confident and, paint a picture, even if you know you can't actually deliver the numbers. And I'm like, well, that doesn't seem like a great trait to have in a business.
Right.
So, I have a lot of questions around that myth. And so when women, come to me saying I'm having so much trouble fundraising, often I just want to shake them and say, like, it has nothing to do with you.
Right.
Might be incredible. I'm sure you're a phenomenal business person, but the system is rigged against you. So
Yes.
I think that's that's a little bit of a reality check that I say because I don't want women to always be kind of looking inward. I'll tell, I'll just speak from my experience. I was always kind of saying, like, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with my presentation? Blah, blah, blah. And then I remember one VC who to this day, like, I appreciate that he was so candid with me, and we have a really great relationship. He said to me, it's not you, it's us. We're four guys sitting around a table, and like, we just honestly, we can't get a gut instinct for your product because we don't use your product. And that was like the most truthful feedback I think I could have gotten of all the VCs that I was interacting with. The majority were men. So I think that just has to be said.
Right.
And that, I was really, I've now, we've moved on to bigger rounds. And so I would say there's less sexism, I think, in the later rounds, because you've got a lot of data to kind of back up what it is that you have built. But in the initial rounds, the seed rounds, even the Series A rounds, I think those are really difficult, because a lot of what you're doing is asking the investors to, find it in their gut to believe it in your product, to believe in you.
Yeah.
And the other thing I will also say is, is your business, does it really require VC funding? VC funding is for a very particular kind of company. It's not for the majority of companies. I say friends and family, but the friends and family round, but that, it's not that everyone has wealthy friends and family. And I think when raising funds is always a game for the well-connected. That well-connected I use broadly, like working at Google, that means you're well-connected, right? And
it's true. It's a lot of us.
Exactly. So like, you use your Google network to the fullest extent. One of my first investors was a former partner that I worked for at Bain. That was a real, he knew I was a hard worker. I was on his case for, I think, 18 months altogether. And so even though he didn't interact with me day to day, he kind of believed that I would deliver. And so I think the first thing, if you're thinking about starting a business, don't even look to VC initially. Just kind of look at your initial network to see if you can put a round together. And working at Google is just a big, big advantage.
Well, I think that's very sound advice. So thank you so much for sharing. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about, the future of fashion and e-commerce, especially in the age of COVID.
Yeah.
So, when the virus was first breaking out in Asia, I'm sure your partners and your suppliers were at the forefront. So you must have been receiving some of the comms. What were the thoughts that were going through your head around what the implications were for your business?
Yeah, I still wonder how we could have prepared better. I think truthfully we were naive. I think a
lot of businesses were caught off guard, right? So you're not alone.
I think even with SARS or MRSA or all these other, or just all these pandemics that have happened, I think the U.S. was relatively sheltered from all of them. And so even when COVID first started becoming an issue, really, in China, when we really first started hearing about it was when our factories had to close in January and February. And so we knew our spring delivery, our spring collection was being delayed, and we were planning around that. But it was still a problem afar, right? And
Right.
my family lives in Japan, and so I'm sure many of you remember the Princess Cruise. How could we forget? And so that was happening in Japan, and so I was hearing about it from my parents, but I just, again, it felt like well, this will be another thing that, like Ebola, it'll affect that continent, but not ours. And then I think in mid-February, when it became clear that it was going to hit us too, we started scenario planning. But I think, we weren't thinking this was the 1918 Spanish flu. We were thinking it would be a momentary blip where maybe we had to close our stores for a few weeks. I think even in our worst case scenario, we said we would have to close 75% of our stores, but they would only close for 8 weeks. And when I think it was the Friday before everything the Monday before everything closed in New York City, we had one of our best sales days in our stores. And so we were saying like, this COVID thing, it's not going to affect us all that much. And then by Friday, we closed all of our stores. And so it was dramatic, how things shifted. And even in that, I remember even then when we said, okay, we're going to close our stores, the plan was to reopen all of them by June, because I don't think it was just us. I think everyone thought June was going to be this magical month when things were going to reopen. And clearly that just hasn't been the case. So I think it's been a real lesson for us and for me personally in having a plan and never sticking to it, in the sense that your plan needs to be constantly changing. And so I think every single day my executive team is getting together and trying to piece together new data. I think just even this week, our understanding is that we have a store in San Francisco that we were really excited to reopen, and in talks to open another one in Embarcadero.
Yes.
And now numbers in California are going up, and so that's data that's just changed in less than a week.
Right.
So we're really learning to we're learning to make different decisions every day. I think that's as plainly as I can put it.
Yeah, and that's fair. I think there's just a ton of unpredictability at this point in time. So it's really hard to say, or have any foresight, months into the future.
Yeah.
But I suppose, beyond opening some stores, are you perhaps thinking about new product lines? Or I think you had actually done a very successful job of rebranding a pair of work pants that you had into joggers.
Yeah, Colby joggers, formerly known as the Colby origami suiting pants.
Yes, there you go.
Yeah, there you go. No, so that's it's true. I mean, I think one of the things that we were saying is, we never really call ourselves a workwear company. We've always said we're a company for working women. So, I mean, as you can see right now, like even though we're not in a physical office, we're both women who are working. And it's funny. We were just interviewed in the New York Times yesterday about Zoom tops, and I said this is my top, actually. This is my Chadwick top, and I have this literally in 4 colors, and I have them stacked next to my laptop. And every time I have a very special call like this, I pull this out and I pull out my statement earrings and I call it a day.
Nice.
But it's I think even though we're not physically in an office, it's not as though our clothing needs have gone out the door. And one of the things that I think we've been able to do most successfully is really stay in touch with Samantha, our customer, and talk about what her needs are. And the Colby jogger, like you mentioned, is I think that's a really good example of one of the, I think the marketing creativity that can go into adapting to these changes. So the Colby pants were one of our best sellers, even before COVID too. We call them origami suiting because you could fold them up and then just take them out on the other side and wear them without having to iron them, in your hotel room. And they're incredibly comfortable. They have these elastic waistbands. And then when COVID hit, I mean, the sales for those pants just tanked. Not entirely surprisingly, like who's wearing, they come with a matching jacket. Who's wearing a suit right now? But took those pants and we just rebranded them as Colby joggers, because truthfully, I wear those pants all the time at home. And suddenly sales for those particular pants, just skyrocketed. And now, I mean, they were back to pre-COVID levels, maybe about 2 weeks after we changed the name. That's the talk about another shocking moment, but
yeah,
it was a little bit of marketing creativity that led to that. And so, I think we've always prided ourselves on comfort and practicality and machine washability. And it's really just tweaking that messaging a little bit so that our customers still feel that we're relevant to her and her life right now.
Yeah, no, I think that's those are all really great. I think beyond, expanding beyond the lens of COVID, are there any trends that you're seeing in fashion or e-com that you're particularly excited about?
One of the things that I think it's been happening, I think, in fashion for a while, and it's just going to kind of keep pushing forward, is I think women are, especially when I started MM, there was more of the women must dress like one of the men mentality. Just taking a broader look, I think Michelle Obama had a lot to do with pushing the envelope there. I think people will remember, when she did her official portrait, she picked a dress that was sleeveless, which was really unheard of at that time. Mm-hmm. And now if you see a lot of women actually even on the campaign trail, they're wearing a lot of dresses and bright colored dresses, which really just was not happening 10 years ago. People were wearing, black, navy, gray suits, suiting dresses, if you will. And one of the initiatives that we actually launched earlier this year is this campaign called Ready to Run, where we offered to dress any candidate who was running for office. We said female candidate, but open to men too. And we actually have transgender candidates running as well who said to us, I was like, we've never had this service before, and so I'm really looking forward to it. And so our stylists are working with these different candidates and saying, how can we dress you for your campaign? And a lot of these women are gravitating towards these like really bright colored dresses, which makes me happy, that we're not, I think, following the boys' dress code.
Yes.
So that's been, I think, one just big change we'll see. I think women are not afraid to stand out the way we may have been even 10 years ago. So looking forward to that change.
Yes, me too. I think it's progress in many ways. So I'm looking forward towards a brighter future for sure.
Yeah, that's a good tagline, Ivana.
Came up with it on the spot, marketing savvy. Just kidding.
Yeah, I think with clothes, people are like, oh, clothes. What does clothes have to do with politics? But AOC actually tweeted about or Instagrammed about her campaign, and she said, a huge part of my running my campaign was getting my voters to imagine me in the role of Congresswoman. That's a huge part of what you're trying to do, and so clothing, yes, in a sense, actually really is quite powerful. I think it really has the power to affect not only the way other people see you, but the way you feel about yourself that day.
Absolutely. I want to touch on your leadership philosophy with the last couple of minutes that we have. I think especially in times of, an economic and health crisis, strong leadership is truly paramount. And I know you're a huge advocate of leading with compassion, and something you call, and I might butcher this, kizukai, which is Japanese. I got it? Okay.
Yeah.
Japanese for empathy and action, which I think is so beautiful. So can you share a little bit more about your leadership philosophy?
Sure. So the empathy and action, just to elaborate on that a little bit more, I think empathy and being a compassionate person is an essential part of being a good, human being, but I think also business person. And, it's funny, you're talking about marketing. I think marketing, what is it if not the ability to put yourself in your customer's shoes? So I think that's that's fundamental. And I think that's true of any business. Empathy in action. The reason why we, use this Japanese word instead of just saying empathy is because there's a slight nuance difference there. Kizukai is about, the example I often give is if someone walks into the office panting and looking really hot, an empathetic person would go up and say like, hey, how are you? Like, can I grab you a glass of water? Whereas the person who displays kizukai would just go and grab the glass of water.
I see.
Right? And so that's the slight difference there. And I think, and such a big part of Japanese culture. And also I think something that I really pride my team and my company for having. I have an incredible team. I'm sure many leaders would say that, but I am so fond of them and proud of them. And I think having worked in companies where I wasn't always happy to show up to work, where I didn't always like everyone that I was working with, I think one thing that was really important to me was I wanted to come in every day and feel like, wow, this is an amazing group of people that I get to surround myself with. These are good people that I would trust so much with. And I think so we have, 10 company values, but when you pull any one of my employees, I probably 9 out of 10 of them would say that particular value, kizukai, is the one that they love the most and the one that sets my company apart. We're 80% female, and I'm not saying that this is a particularly feminine characteristic or this is about being a women-led company, but I think it is about kind of assuming best intent in other people, and then also being able to help each other out without kind of looking for reward or recognition, to be able to put yourself in that other person's shoes and say, like, what is it that I could be doing to make her day a little bit easier or to make her work a little bit easier? So that I think is a lot of it is informed by, I think, having had some experiences in the past where I felt like I couldn't be my best self. I'm rambling, so I'll just pause.
No, not at all. I really appreciate your candor, and if anything, I'm beaming, thinking we need more leaders like you, Sarah. Truly.
Well, yeah, always a work in progress. I think just even around, a lot of what's happening around the murder of George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, I'm learning a lot. I think that's one thing. I think you come in with a very strong notion of what you want your company to be, and you're always trying to communicate that and share that with your employees. And I still lead the values orientation for every single new hire orientation because that matters to me. But then that matters to me so much. And then I think being able to really just take that to the next level and keep iterating and keep learning, that's so important. I think, while 2020 has been a disaster of a year, yeah, exactly. I think there are a lot of learnings coming out of it. So yes, definitely, I'm a work in progress, but I have a really amazing team to help me through it.
Yeah, I mean, we're excited to see what you'll accomplish next. So I have just one last question for you, and then we actually have quite an active chat with questions coming in from the audience. So we'll go to those in a bit.
Sure.
But just the last question here. What parting advice do you have for future entrepreneurs like yourself?
So maybe I'll start with a practical one. The practical one is to find yourself a side hustle. And so what I mean by that is when I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, they say things like, well, people who want to be entrepreneurs, I'm going to save X $1,000 before I go and quit and start my thing because I want to have, some money, some cushion. And I often say, well, if you're living in New York or San Francisco, there's no way you're going to save up enough money to be able to do whatever it is that you want to do for the next 2 years. I mean, unless I think you're really, really frugal. It's a really, really tall order. So don't bother doing that. Go find a side hustle that will let you pay your bills. Sure, you're not going to be able to live as extravagantly as you might be currently with a full-time job, but for me, that was tutoring. So I was tutoring the SATs from 4 p.m. usually till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And that's how I paid rent and, took care of my basic needs and got to work on MM for almost 2.5 years without taking in an income. So I think there's, again, like we go back to the VC conversation that, all of these conversations about starting a business make it sound so impossible. Like you have to have VC backing and this kind of huge nest egg to get yourself started. But no, you don't. Like go tutor, go walk dogs, go be a barista. There are a lot of ways to make money. And I think sometimes when we're in the ivory towers of Bain or, Google or what have you, you forget that. So, yeah, so that's just one practical advice I would give. The second one, which hate to be a cliche, but is just do it, is I think, again, it relates to the first comment, the first piece of advice that I shared, but I think we have a tendency to over prepare. Right? Like if you're working at Google, like you got there because you worked so hard and you prepared so much and you did so many things right. And I think when it comes to startup world, you're going to try so many things and so many things are going to fail. 99% of the things that you're going to try you're going to fail at. And so what you really want is time. You want to give yourself a lot of time to do things. I would never even consider a business a failure unless you've really been at it for at least 2 to 3 years minimum. And so don't overplan it. I would say just go and do it, and you're going to learn so much in the process. And so you can take care of yourself financially. Like, go walk some dogs. So I'll leave it at that.
I think that's sound advice. So let's take a question from the audience.
Sure.
We actually have a great one here, which is right on the nose, from Carly Rose. So she says, "Hi, Sarah. I love your brand. Happy customer here. During your entrepreneurial journey, what were some of the biggest obstacles you faced along the way, and how did you overcome them?"
Yeah, biggest obstacles. I mean, funding and cash is truly one of the biggest ones. I think about when was I most anxious, and the most anxious I was when we were at multiple times, especially in the early days, about to run out of cash. And yes. I've shared this in a different a podcast before, but there was a point where our checking account actually it went below zero and went to negative $2,000, and I didn't even know you could go below zero. But it turns out you can, and gosh, those were really, really stressful times. What I don't even know what the lesson is there. I mean, I wonder if we could have done things differently, but I think to a certain extent, those were. I mean, that is kind of part of the startup journey, is always being fearful that you're going to run out of money. I think other things that have been stressful. Thinking again to like some of my more anxious moments is when I didn't necessarily have the executive team that I needed around me. I now have an incredible president who is such a wonderful partner to me, a great COO, a great executive team, and they are very much in the foxhole with me. And so I think those two things, like, if you have money and you have a great team, that takes care of, I would say, like a good portion of your anxiety. So there you go.
I think that's actually a perfect segue. There's another question here, I think, related to finding a good team, but a question from Cassandra.
Yeah.
Do you have tips for picking a good headhunter?
Oh, yes, I do. We've used a variety, and I would say it really comes down to a personality match. I think this is true of actually working with a variety of agencies too, but yes, like working with a certain tier of agencies, I think, guarantees some success, but it's really much more about the individual relationships. And so if you're thinking about working with a headhunter, I would just spend a lot of time with them up front. Like, don't even really forget about the firm's name for a moment, and just really see if you have that connection, and if that person really understands what it is that you're looking for. And then also, does that person write good emails? Because that's actually the most common form of initial outreach, right? And so
Right.
is that person someone who's just going to kind of blast 100 emails using the exact same script? Or, do they, I think this is this is just good sales 101, but does that person actually have a way of getting people to listen? Those are things that I would really look out for. And I rarely think that the fee actually matches the quality. The person who found me, Miyako, he charged me $2,000, and it's still the best $2,000 I've ever spent. So, yeah, So that would be my advice.
And I think we might have time for two more. But here's one from Anisha. Okay. Would love to know how LaFleur's brand is evolving to meet growing demand for more casual clothing and athleisure that works in a work from home setting.
Yeah, great question, Anisha. So I think one of the things that we were that we spotted, there's this working from home, more casualization trend that's certainly accelerated because of COVID. But I would say this was actually happening already maybe in 2015, 16, as we started to see more people moving into freelance culture, working from home, just being remote, being actually a possibility. And so I think it was in 2016, maybe 2017, Miyako and I actually we spent some time in San Francisco just religiously interviewing a bunch of women. I'm sure many of them who worked at Google or in tech, saying, what is it that you're really looking for? And it was fascinating. I think in some ways women in tech have it harder than women who are, for example, lawyers, for whom the dress code is very clear. What we were hearing a lot of is like, I don't want to wear hoodies to work, but if I wear a dress, people think I'm interviewing. So like, can you help me find a good, what's the go-to uniform for women in tech? That was a lot of what we were hearing. And that led us to launch a collection in, I want to say early 2018, which was, and we started calling it Power Casual. It's a very distinct look that I'm sure all of you women will know, which is, it signifies that you are on trend. You know what you're talking about. You're very much of the zeitgeist, but you're not stuffy. And it's a very delicate balance, I think. And so a lot of the sales, the Foster pants, which have been it's been our best-selling product for 4 years, but I know they're one of the most coveted products by women in tech. They have these pants that can they have a hemming device, so you can wear it short or you can wear it long. It also doesn't have an elastic waistband, so your stomach can kind of expand with it. The pants expand with your stomach. Anyway,
critical.
So critical, exactly. So anyway, I think, and COVID has really only pushed that movement, I think, faster. But I'm really happy that we already were kind of leaning in that direction.
Yep. Great. And one last question, actually, from Marla. I think also along that vein. She says, "Thanks for joining us today. What was your big break that led to LaFleur to flourish and gain attention in the competitive fashion industry? Was it a specific style that was created?"
Yeah, this is a great question. Gosh, and it's true. The fashion industry is so competitive. We had to basically beg our factories to work with us in the beginning because the barrier to entry is so low. That their designers come and go, one season after another. Honestly, I think the moment where we felt like we actually struck gold was when we launched Bento. That was and I think we had, and I had mixed feelings about it, because what I really wanted to be known for was our products. We take so much pride in the products that we make, and we really stand by the quality and the design and the fit. And what we actually got known for was more the delivery mechanism, right?
Yeah.
But I think that, that was actually good in some ways, because it was something that was very of the moment. That box model, which, by the way, we don't even do bento anymore. We have something called omakase, where we show customers how to mix and match and wear the pieces differently. But we retired bento about a little over a year ago now, and but it was really good in the sense that it got customers to know about us. And so, but it was, I had mixed feelings initially, because I remember people would say like, "Oh, LaFleur, that bento company," and I was like, "But we make great clothes."
Beyond that, yeah.
Beyond the cardboard box here. Yeah.
Well, Sarah, it's been such an honor to have you here with us today. I think we had a really great conversation, and just judging from the chats alone, I think everyone really enjoyed what you had to say. So wishing you the best of luck with everything that stands in the horizon for LaFleur, as well as for yourself. And, we'll be signing off here today.
Thank you so much for having me, and keep fighting the good fight, all of you Googlers.
Yes,
all right.
will.
Take care. All right. Bye, guys.
Bye now. See ya.